The sun was setting behind the towering buildings of New York City, casting a golden glow over the bustling streets. Donald Trump, stepping out of his sleek black SUV, adjusted his suit jacket and looked around. It had been a long day of meetings, and all he wanted was a quiet dinner at his favorite restaurant. But as he took his first steps toward the entrance, something caught his eye. A man, sitting on the cold concrete sidewalk, his face weathered with age and hardship, was holding a cardboard sign that read, "Veteran, homeless, need help." His clothes were torn, his boots worn down to the soles, and his eyes told a story of pain and loss. It wasn't the first time Trump had seen a homeless person, but something about this veteran's worn-out appearance and desperate plea stopped him in his tracks. The bustling crowd around him seemed to ignore the man, each person too wrapped up in their own world to take notice. Trump felt a tug at his heart. He couldn't shake the image of the man's face, empty yet hopeful. In that brief moment, everything seemed to pause. Without thinking, Trump approached the veteran. The man looked up, surprise flickering in his eyes as Trump stood before him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Trump was taken aback by the deep sadness that lingered in the veteran's eyes, but it was something else that made him act. "Are you okay?" Trump asked, his voice surprisingly soft, given his usual commanding presence. The veteran hesitated, his eyes darting to the crowds around them, before replying in a low voice. "No, sir, not really. I served my country, and now I'm here, just trying to survive." Trump paused, his mind racing. He was used to high-profile meetings, to the well-dressed and powerful. This, however, was something entirely different. And despite the voices in his head urging him to move on, something told him this moment was important. "Tell me your name," Trump said, taking a seat beside the man, his gaze steady. "Frank," the veteran replied, his voice shaky but steady. "Frank Thompson. I serve in the Army, sir." Trump nodded. He had met many veterans in his life, but never one in this situation. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Veterans were supposed to be honored, supported, and cared for, not abandoned on the streets. Frank continued, "I've been trying to find work for months. I don't know what happened. I don't know where it all went wrong." Trump looked down at the cardboard sign. It was a simple plea, yet it spoke volumes about the struggles veterans faced. He had heard about the homelessness crisis among veterans, but hearing it from Frank, seeing it firsthand, this was different. Trump took a deep breath, his mind buzzing with a plan that formed almost instantly. The shock of the moment wasn't over yet. He would do something that would shake Frank's world, and perhaps the world of others too. The crowd around them continued to bustle as if nothing had happened, but Trump wasn't focused on them. He was focused on Frank, on this man who had once been a hero but now seemed invisible, lost in the shadows of society's indifference. After a few moments of silence, Trump leaned forward, his voice steady but commanding. "Frank, I want to help you." Frank blinked, clearly surprised. "What do you mean, sir?" I'm not just going to offer you a few dollars. I'm going to offer you something that will change your life," Trump said, his eyes narrowing with intent. "I'm going to give you the chance to get back on your feet. I'm going to make sure you have the support you need to rebuild your life." Frank was speechless. He looked up at Trump, his eyes wide, unsure whether this was some kind of joke or if the billionaire was truly serious. No one had ever offered him anything like this before. Trump continued, "I've met a lot of people in my life, Frank, and I've seen a lot of success stories. But I've also seen failure. I've seen people fall through the cracks. And I've seen too many veterans suffer like this. It's unacceptable, but you don't have to be a statistic. You're not just some random person on the street. You're a veteran who deserves better." Frank's voice trembled, "But I don't know how to start over. I don't even know where to begin." Trump placed a hand on his shoulder, looking directly into Frank's eyes. "That's why I'm here. We'll start by getting you the help you need. I'll get you into a program. I'll make sure you have everything you need to turn your life around. This is your chance, Frank. Don't let it slip away." For the first time in a long time, Frank felt a flicker of hope. It was as if someone had finally seen him, really seen him, not as a homeless man, but as a person worthy of a second chance. He could barely believe it. As the conversation continued, the small crowd that had gathered around them began to murmur. Word of the unexpected encounter between Trump and the homeless veteran had quickly spread. People stopped to watch, many with phones raised to capture the moment. The idea of a powerful figure like Trump engaging with a struggling veteran was rare, and they were witnessing something extraordinary. Frank had always been used to feeling invisible, but now, with people watching, he could hardly believe what was happening. But Trump wasn't concerned with the cameras. He was focused on helping Frank and making sure the world knew that this was just the beginning of something much bigger. After a few minutes, Trump stood up, turning to face the crowd that had formed. Listen up, everyone. I've just made an important decision. Frank here isn't just a veteran. He's a man who deserves a chance to succeed, and I'm going to help him do that. The crowd grew quiet, the energy shifting as people leaned in to hear what he would say next. I'm launching a new initiative, a program that will help homeless veterans across this country. We're going to give them the tools they need to rebuild their lives, to get back to work, to reconnect with their families, and to be treated with the respect they deserve, Trump declared, his voice carrying the weight of the announcement. And Frank, you're the first person I'm helping. You're going to be the face of this program. The reaction was immediate. The crowd cheered, some clapping, others shouting words of support. Frank stood there, unable to believe what was happening. His life had just changed in an instant, and it was all because someone had cared enough to offer him more than just pity. The days following the announcement were a whirlwind for Frank. What had started as a simple conversation with Donald Trump on a street corner had transformed into a life-altering opportunity. Trump's initiative, aimed at helping homeless veterans, was gaining traction fast. But for Frank, the most significant change was the promise that he would be the first beneficiary of the program. The first step was getting Frank out of the street and into a temporary shelter that offered counseling and medical care. But the real breakthrough came when Trump arranged for Frank to meet with a team of specialists, career coaches, financial advisors, and even therapists who could help him process the trauma he had endured during his military service. At first, Frank felt overwhelmed by it all. He had spent so long surviving on the streets, keeping his head down and avoiding any situation that could lead to further disappointment, that he wasn't sure if he was even ready for such drastic changes. The weight of guilt from his past and the shame of his circumstances pressed heavily on him. But as he spent more time with the experts, slowly but surely, he began to realize something. He wasn't alone anymore. He had people who were genuinely invested in his future. Trump's team provided him with everything, from job training to healthcare, while the public response to his story was nothing short of remarkable. People from across the country began sending messages of support and donations to the newly established Veterans Program. Frank, once a forgotten face on the streets of New York, was now a symbol of hope. One evening, as he sat in a small apartment, now furnished with the basics, an uncomfortable but clean couch, a small kitchen, and a bed he could actually sleep in, Frank found himself reflecting on everything that had changed in such a short time. His thoughts were interrupted by a phone call from Trump. "Frank," Trump's voice boomed, "how's everything going? I want to hear about your progress." Frank smiled, feeling a warmth he hadn't felt in years. It's been overwhelming, sir, but in the best way. I got a steady job now, and I've been seeing a therapist. Things are looking up. That's what I like to hear," Trump said, a rare sense of satisfaction in his voice. "You're proof that people can turn their lives around, Frank. Now, I want you to tell your story. Get out there and let others know it's possible. You can inspire millions." Frank paused. For the first time, he felt worthy of sharing his journey. He wasn't just some homeless vet anymore. He had a voice, and now people were listening. As the weeks passed, Frank's transformation became more public. Trump made sure that Frank's story was featured in the media, and soon, news outlets were covering the inspiring tale of the veteran who had once been living on the streets, only to turn his life around with the help of an unexpected benefactor. But Frank didn't want to just be a feel-good story. He wanted to use his newfound platform to spark change. One morning, Trump invited Frank to a press conference where he would address the media and talk about his journey. Standing before the podium, Frank's heart raced. He was no longer the man who had sat on the street corner, pleading for help. He was now a beacon of hope, and he had a responsibility to speak up for others who were still in the same position he had been. "Ladies and gentlemen," Frank began, his voice strong despite his nerves, "I'm here today because a man who didn't have to took a moment to notice me. Donald Trump didn't just give me money or a meal. He gave me my life back. He gave me a chance to do better, to be better. There was a pause as the room absorbed his words. Frank continued, his confidence growing. And it's not just me, he added. There are thousands of veterans out there who are suffering, who are forgotten by society. But if we all take the time to notice them, if we all make it our mission to help, we can change lives. We can bring people back from the brink. The audience sat in stunned silence for a moment before erupting into applause. Frank had done what he had always dreamed of. He had used his pain to help others. In the months that followed, the veterans program that Trump had started continued to grow. What began as a simple act of kindness had turned into a nationwide movement. The program helped thousands of veterans find shelter, employment, and support from mental health struggles. For Frank, the success of the program wasn't just about the numbers, it was about the people. He personally mentored several veterans, helping them navigate the obstacles he had once faced. He also worked closely with Trump's team to ensure that the initiative reached even more corners of the country one day. As Trump visited the program's headquarters to check on its progress, he found Frank standing by a group of new veterans, offering them advice and encouragement. The two exchanged a nod, understanding that this was more than just a success story. It was a legacy that would continue to grow. As Trump left the building, he turned to Frank. "You've made a real difference, Frank. You're proof that even the hardest situations can be overcome with the right support." Frank smiled. "It's not just me, sir. It's all of us. Together, we're changing the world." Frank's story had a ripple effect across the nation. People began to rally around the cause, donating their time and money to support the Veterans Initiative. The program expanded to offer housing, education, job placement, and mental health resources to thousands of veterans who had once been forgotten. But Frank didn't stop there. He made it his mission to speak out about the importance of supporting those who serve in the military, of recognizing their sacrifices and providing them with the dignity and care they deserved. Years later, when Frank looked back on that fateful day, when Trump had first noticed him on the street, he could hardly believe how far he had come. He was no longer the man who had been invisible to the world. He was a symbol of hope, a living testament to the power of second chances. And he owed it all to one simple act of kindness. As the years passed, Frank's life settled into a new rhythm. He was now an advocate for veterans, traveling across the country to speak at events, sharing his story, and encouraging others to never give up. But the journey wasn't without its challenges. Despite all the progress, the ghosts of his past still lingered. His time on the streets, the battles he had fought alone. It wasn't easy to erase the scars. One evening, as Frank was preparing for another speaking engagement in Washington, D.C., he received an unexpected message. It was from a former comrade in arms, someone he hadn't heard from in years. The message read, "Frank, I need your help. I'm in a bad place. Can you meet me?" Frank's heart sank. He had heard similar stories before. Veterans who had struggled to find their way after returning home. Some of them never made it out of the darkness. But Frank wasn't the same man who had been living on the streets. He had a new purpose. He had the tools to help others, just as Trump had helped him. Without hesitation, Frank replied, "Where are you? I'll be there." When Frank arrived at the address his friend had sent, he was met with a surprising sight. It wasn't the crumbling apartment complex or the desolate alleyway he had expected. Instead, his old comrade, Jack, was standing outside a modest but well-kept home. Jack was a different man than the one Frank had known in the military. Clean-shaven, wearing a neatly pressed shirt, and his eyes full of hope. "Jack? What's going on?" Frank asked. Frank stepped inside Jack's home, his mind racing. The last time he had seen Jack, the man was a shadow of himself, struggling with post-traumatic stress, drowning in despair, and living in the same darkness Frank had once known all too well. Yet here Jack was, standing tall, a symbol of transformation that Frank could hardly believe. "I heard about the work you've been doing," Jack said as they sat down at the small kitchen table. "I couldn't believe it when I first saw your name in the papers. You went from living on the streets to helping thousands of veterans. I never thought I'd see that kind of change, let alone be a part of it." Frank chuckled softly, shaking his head. "I didn't think it was possible either. But when Trump took a chance on me, He gave me something I'd lost long ago: hope. And it's what I try to give back to others now. Jack paused, his gaze thoughtful. I used to think it was too late for me, that I couldn't find my way back. But you show me it's never too late. Frank smiled, a sense of pride swelling within him. That's the power of second chances. It's why I do this. It's why the program exists, to show everyone that it's never too late, no matter how low you've sunk. The two men shared a quiet moment of reflection. Jack had come from the same place as Frank, but now they both stood on the other side of their struggles, standing as living proof of what could happen when someone reached out, when someone believed in the power of redemption. Frank felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. It wasn't just Trump who had given him a chance. It was the community, the people who had come together to make this movement a reality. It was the belief that no veteran should be left behind. As Frank continued his work with the Veterans Initiative, he found himself more determined than ever to make a lasting difference. The program had already helped so many people. Jack was just one of the success stories, but Frank knew that the work wasn't done. There were still too many veterans out there who hadn't found their way, too many who were slipping through the cracks. He and Trump continued to work together, expanding the program and raising awareness across the country. It was clear that the initiative had struck a chord with the public, with people from all walks of life coming forward to support veterans in need. One day, as Frank sat in a meeting with Trump, discussing the future of the program, the former president leaned across the table, a smile tugging at his lips. "Frank," he said, his tone serious yet warm, "you've done something amazing. You've shown everyone that there's more to a person's story than their past. You've proven that redemption is possible, and that's something we can all learn from." Frank nodded, feeling a swell of pride. "None of this would have happened without your help. You gave me a platform, and I used it to lift others up. And now, we're changing lives one veteran at a time." Trump looked at him with genuine admiration. "You're the one who did the hard work, Frank. You're the one who made this possible. I just gave you the chance." As the meeting ended, Frank left the room with a renewed sense of purpose. He knew there was still much work to be done, but now he had the resources, the support, and the drive to keep going. With Trump's backing, the Veterans Program was poised to grow even further, helping thousands more veterans like Frank and Jack find their way back to a life of dignity and hope. The Veterans Initiative became a legacy that Frank would carry with him for the rest of his life. As the program continued to expand, Frank's role evolved. He became a mentor, a leader, and a symbol of what could be achieved when people came together to help those who served their country. Years later, when Frank stood before a new class of veterans, sharing his story with them, he knew he had fulfilled the promise he had made to himself when he first met Trump on that street corner. He had found his purpose, and through the program, he had given countless others the chance to find theirs. "I was just like you," Frank said to the group of veterans seated in front of him. "I was lost, hopeless, and living on the streets. But then someone believed in me." And that's what this program is about: believing in each other, lifting each other up, and making sure that no veteran has to face their struggles alone. He paused for a moment, his voice growing steady with emotion. "If I can do it, so can you. You just have to take that first step, and you'll find that there are people here ready to help you." The room was silent, the veterans absorbing his words. Frank smiled to himself, knowing that this was what he had been working for. This was the true meaning of success. Not fame, not wealth, but the chance to make a real difference in the lives of others. As Frank prepared to retire from his active role in the program, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. From being a homeless veteran, living in a world of despair, to becoming the leader of a nationwide movement, he had witnessed the power of kindness, empathy, and belief in second chances. One final act would mark the end of his active participation in the program. A large, public event to honor the veterans who had been through the initiative and to celebrate the ongoing work of the program. As the crowd gathered, Frank took the stage, his heart full as he looked out at the faces of so many veterans who had turned their lives around. That he took the microphone, his voice strong but full of emotion. "When I first met Donald Trump, I was a broken man. But thanks to the support of people like him, I've been able to rebuild my life. And I'm here today to say that if I can do it, so can you." The applause that followed was deafening. And for Frank, It was the final moment of validation he had been seeking all these years. Not just for himself, but for every veteran who had been given a second chance. A chance to start over and reclaim their dignity.